So we're here at Content Marketing World again, and I have Joe Pulizzi. I don't think very many people know who you are, right?
Stop it.
So you're the founder of the Content Marketing Institute and this amazing event. And the one thing that I'm super impressed about you is there's so many people wearing orange here, right? Where
it's
else
ridiculous,
do you
actually.
Pick a conference to go, I need to go change my outfits and what I bring to come here? And I think it just shows that people are identifying this event with something bigger, a movement, and that movement has a color, and that color is orange. And
it is, I looked at the app this year, and I was blown away by the number of people that are, like you said, this is what we're packing. It's orange. It's, and it's just started for, hey, it's a cute thing. It'd be fun. Obviously, so in 2007, when we launched what ultimately became Content Marketing Institute, the colors were orange and gray. And the only reason I just started wearing orange shirts, because I said, I think when you start a company, you're supposed to support it. So I bought a lot of button-down orange shirts. And I got a request from Brussels, Belgium. This is 2 years later, so in 2009. And they said, Joe, would you come over and do a keynote presentation? The only issue is we want you to wear a black tux with a silver tie. I said, I'll wear whatever you want. Wear a monkey suit if you want me to. You're paying me to come over. That's fine. So I did the speech. Worked out great. I came off stage. Never been to Europe before. And I had 3 people at that event come up to me and say, hey, great speech, Joe, but why aren't you wearing orange? And I never even realized. So then, come back to the team. And I said, I think there's something about this orange. Let's go off the deep end. Right? Yeah. That's what we've done, obviously. And it's just fun. Of course, you see we've got the little orange snack tables. Yeah. I'm wearing, orange those people mints. Listening, I've got a full orange suit on right now, orange mints, everything. And it's something fun. And I think that's where what I love about this conference more than anything else is that people understand, first and foremost, we're here to have fun. We're here to network. Because if you don't if you're not having fun, you're not going to be open to new ideas. I believe that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to set.
Yeah. And the venue, I mean, one, they did a fantastic job getting ready for the Republican convention. So you come here and you just see that they are investing in Cleveland, and this conference just fits so well here. And it's hard to separate. Really, because when you get off an airplane, you see the signage for Content Marketing World, you see the taxi cab toppers, you get to the hotels, everybody's wearing orange. And you go to a lot of events. Mm-hmm. I probably go to about 40 or 50 events a year. It's crazy how many events I go to, sometimes 2-3 a week. And I never see a city embrace an event like that. So we're blessed to have the city behind us. Oh, absolutely. And it's the downtown is amazing, just moving around and going out and having a good time. It's been a trip. And we drive here every year, and each time we have some sort of accident with a semi truck, but
you're here, nobody got hurt. It's all good.
Yeah, nobody got hurt. But so tell me a little bit about what's exciting about this year compared to last year at this event.
I really believe that, and I think if you look at the agenda, you'll see that this industry has taken a step up. I really believe that this is an approach that almost all major enterprises believe in. Now, I talked about in my opening keynote that I don't think most of them have bought in 100%, and that's our problem. They're dabbling. Mm-hmm. We're halfway there. We've got to go all in, and if you look at what's the definition of commitment, you're either all in or you're out. There's no gray area, and right now we're in that gray area, but we're moving toward that full commitment. We already have the people here at Content Marketing World are already committed. These people don't have an issue. It's going back to senior management and really saying this is part of how we're gonna communicate with our customers differently. So that I like the fact that I think the biggest change probably since 2011 for the first Content Marketing World is we don't have a what is content marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about business models, data, analytics. We're talking about some serious stuff here because now you actually have a ton of case studies that you can say, look, they're successful. They've done it. What did they do? Can we take this apart? Can we re-engineer it? There's not one way to get there, but here's what we can learn. It's excited about. I'm excited about the fact that there's this is a global phenomenon. I mean,
Yeah.
there's 60 countries represented here. So it's, that's what's exciting. I think hopefully, the mission was always, yes, advance the practice of content marketing, but make our audience's lives better in some way. I don't know. And I think if you look around, these people are pretty happy.
Yeah.
They love doing what they're doing. A lot of journalists that didn't have a job now have jobs in corporate roles.
Absolutely.
And they're having fun and they're loving what they're doing because they're making a difference in their audience's lives. So it's, we're not saving the world, and we're not feeding the hungry and housing the homeless, but hopefully we're doing
but maybe
something
you're
significant.
helping, and that's what I love about it, is you're helping organizations who are get their message out, right? Because we work a lot with like the VFW, and they've been putting out a magazine for nearly 100 years on a consistent basis, month after month. And yet on digital, they're trying to figure out their audience because they really want to support veterans. And so you talk about content marketing. We put in better content management systems and get them the tools and have them understand their audience. And they get to go out and do that, and then the people who are feeding the hungry, they're the same way. So it actually is pretty cool to see how all these organizations, it's not just the enterprises selling business, business to business, but it's people really reaching in and figuring out how to reach their audience. It's
a great point.
It's a buzzword that's all over the place.
Well, what I love, I remember I've been selling this stuff for 16 years.
Yeah.
I started in 2000, as you know. And when you go in and you talk to a chief marketing officer and you say, look, this is how you're going to sell, but you're never going to talk about your products and services in this, because your audience really doesn't care, except for a very small part of the buyer's journey. They don't care.
Yeah.
So how do you get them to care all the other times?
Exactly.
So you focus on them and their needs and whatever. And I remember I got laughed out of so many conversations. It was just ridiculous. And I love the fact that now you've got, I like the fact that this event has started, and as we're here talking about just kicked off Content Marketing World, where you can kind of see the fruit of all the labor that's happening in the industry.
Yeah. So there was a shift last year in the book you put out. It's a great book, and it is like epic content marketing for entrepreneurs. And as a 7th generation entrepreneur, I see this. Like my dad, he has a business, and my wife's dad has a business, and I can finally point them at a resource and say, you don't have a marketer, right? You're too small. And here's how you're going to go out and build an audience in your town or in your region or whatever your coverage area is. And I know for you, that was probably quite a bit of a shift to change audiences and who you're selling to. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with the book.
So the book, Content Inc., and it's my 4th book. And the 3rd book, Epic Content Marketing, like you mentioned, is very much for large enterprises. But I would always get questions at events I would speak at and say, Joe, we love Epic Content Marketing, but when you're talking about the buyer's journey, it gets a little bit complex. That's not us, and we don't have the funding or the budget. What about us? What about for an entrepreneur or small business? I'm like, well, I don't have that book yet, but I'm like, I put that on the list. I'm like, let's see if I can write that one. And it's basically the story of how Content Marketing Institute was created.
Yeah.
And we, created through the idea of, all right, if we built an audience that knows, likes, and trusts us, if we do that really well through delivering valuable, compelling content on a consistent basis, can we then monetize that audience without actually selling anything up front? We actually didn't have a product or service when we launched. We just were like, okay, let's, we moved from one product to like, okay, let's just total focus on the audience and see what happens. And it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
And then we went out and I'm like, well, are there other examples of this? And so we went out and we found, 10 and then 20 and then 30 and then more. And we went out to each one of them and we said, okay, great. They started with an audience. They're now multi-million-dollar companies. Can we deconstruct and re-engineer the process? And what we found out is that all the companies actually follow the same 6 steps.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh my, I think we actually hit on something. Here's how you can go and you do these 6 steps and here's sort of the timing to it. And that was probably the most exciting. So Claire McDermott, who's editor of Chief Content Officer Magazine, she did all the interviews with me and really worked on it. And we were like, oh my God, like Now we've got to name them. I remember we had this long email back and forth about the content tilt, step 2.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was, it's all about how do you tell a different story. So you have to find an area of little to no competition where you actually have a chance of breaking through all that clutter. It's a big deal. It's like the most important step. And at the same time, I'm a Matrix nut, the movie Matrix.
Oh man.
So I'm like, what should we call this? And the scene where Neo and the spoon, and he's looking at the spoon, but it's not bending for him, and then he tilts his head. That's where content tilt comes from. That, I think I talk about that in the book. But I love that, and I really believe if you have like no money, like you've done this many times. I've done this a few times.
I drove an RV here,
and you're like, how?
Like I
how
get
can
the
I
whole
compete?
budget thing.
Yeah, how can you even be competitive when you're up against billion-dollar companies?
Yeah,
this is how you do it.
Yeah,
and it's not. Can you be the leading expert in your informational niche area? Well, if you look at your content niche and your audience, and you're like, oh, there's 10 or 15 other competitors fighting for that, well, you're not niche enough.
Yep.
Let's find an area you can actually say, if we do the Content Inc. model, we actually can be the leading expert in the world. We can build an audience, and then we can monetize that. That's what people don't. You almost can't go niche enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love that. That's my favorite book of the 4. So I'm partial to it because I truly believe in it. And when you I love anyone on an entrepreneurial journey. I totally feel for them when they come up to me like, I'm spent. Like I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. My family, I can't pay the bills and all this stuff. So I totally get that. And I'm like, look, you have to grit it out. You have to be patient, but are you true to this model?
Yeah.
Like, are you really creating different content? Are you really just targeting one audience at a time? And almost always they're like, why are you on Facebook? Why are you on Twitter? Ask the questions, because you're going to have to stop doing some things, say no to something so you can be great at other things. And so, yeah, I probably talk too much about the book.
I mean,
that's
exactly where it's at, because I think my dad, he owns a Serve Pro franchise, and he's got a region, and the people who are out of his region are getting in his region because they keep creating content and spreading. And it's like, you've got to figure out your market. You got to figure out what they're looking for. So that way, when their house is flooded, right, they're going to call you.
That's right.
And because you've helped them figure out things about that same topic. And it seems simple, right? And when we started our businesses, we figured it out, and we did that, and we drove in it. But yeah, still one of the number one questions I get with the launch of the new website is, what's the monetization model? And it's like, it's build an audience, right? My monetization model is build a bigger audience. So I want to provide value to that audience. And then over time, like you said, we'll figure it out, right? It happens. Yeah. But you don't start with, I'm going to do this to make money, because then people just don't want to participate.
Your example is great, because anyone can duplicate that service. The only way you can differentiate yourself is to communicate differently.
Today, real time is the only time that counts. To stay relevant, you have to stay ahead. Your customers want the right information, right now, wherever they are. So how do you meet the demands of today's customers? By marketing in context. Context accounts for a customer's interaction with your brand. So each touch builds on the next, creating more meaningful experiences for your customers. At Sitecore, we call this context marketing. To do it well, you need marketing technology that has 3 things: contextual intelligence, content management, and omni-channel automation. Contextual intelligence gives you the information you need about your consumers, so the content you manage is more relevant and is automatically delivered wherever your customers are. The Sitecore Experience platform was built for context marketing, so you can create a more personalized customer experience. Demand more from your marketing technology. Demand more from marketing. Own the experience. Sitecore.
So one of the things that I really like about the content that you produce. Now, you produce some great articles and the books, and we devour all of them. But P&R is by far, it's the one podcast that I listen to weekly on a set schedule. That, Tuesday morning in my car on the way, usually I get up at 4, and by the time 4:30, I'm heading towards Starbucks so I can get there when they open so I can work. And I put P&R on. I get the first half, and then the second half when I get seated.
Oh, that's
because
awesome. Thank you.
It is a great conversation. It's not scripted, but every week, like Robert's been mentioning lately, right? Who's up next? It's like
exactly.
you can tell.
We're always like two human beings with a lot of failures in their life,
absolutely,
having a conversation.
But you're so consistent with it, and it is the most consistent podcast that I've listened to, and it's not pre-recorded and released. It just feels like this is part of who you guys are. And this week's episode was about the predictions. Yep. And so what was your favorite prediction that you and Robert spoke about?
Well, I've been talking about this for a long time, and I almost always predict it, but I have a basis for making the prediction this year. So I always talk about there's a huge opportunity for companies of all sizes. It takes a long time to do the content marketing approach. Takes time to build a loyal audience. In all the cases that we've done research, generally 12 to 18 months to monetization. And there's a lot of companies that just don't have that time. They're not patient, or they don't want to be patient. They might see an opportunity somewhere. So I believe that acquisitions from brands of all sizes to blogger sites, influencer sites, and media companies is really going to start to take off. And the example that I used on This Old Marketing podcast was Arrow Electronics. Is actually Victor Gao, who runs digital marketing of Arrow Electronics, a Fortune 200 company, huge company, billion-dollar company. They actually purchased from our parent company, UBM. They purchased a bunch of electronics media sites. So of course I see that, and I'm like, and they've been doing this for a while. It's not like a new thing. And so I reached out to Arrow, and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, well, we see a great opportunity. And instead of having to build in all these areas, we're first looking, like, by the way, like any smart media company, you'd say, well, is there any opportunities to purchase instead of building from scratch? And that's what they're doing. So they're just bolting on, and they are now a media conglomerate in the electronics industry, and they are not a media company. I love that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were lots of examples have happened in the past, but that's the biggest one that I've seen. L'Oreal and Makeup.com and JPEG Magazine was purchased by Adorama Photography Store. So I mean, there are other examples, but this one is a significant example. So now I'm hopeful. I mean, it doesn't even matter. I'm not hoping for it to happen. It's going to happen where you're going to see this, because you have corporate coffers are as full as they've ever been. There's cash sitting on the sidelines.
That was an amazing statistic.
$1 trillion. What is it?
Half of them, like in 25 companies.
25 companies, it's like a $500 billion or something just sitting there. And so those, Apple, Google, Facebook, Cisco Systems, Microsoft. So what are they going to do with that? They're not just going to sit on it. They're going to purchase their way into having an audience, building an audience. So that's my favorite one.
Even a fraction of the interest that they're making could purchase those audiences.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I was talking to an agency group yesterday, and I said, you could just, instead of doing a television ad budget, you could just take that and purchase a whole media company. Literally,
go get your realtor license and figure out how they do it, and then go looking for properties.
It's funny. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about digital real estate, and you're like, you either can go and build your own house, or you can purchase a house. Since you're saying, okay, I like that property there. That makes sense. That a lot of people are driving by that property. It's great for our business. We're going to purchase it. That's all we're talking about. Yeah. It's really simple, and I think that there's a huge opportunity for it.
And it's this. It kind of brings together, because almost all of these properties have influencers in them, and they're not, it's not like they celebrity influencers, but they're people in that arena, wherever they're talking. They're those influencers, and they're so powerful because they love the brand. And so somebody who can come in and take that on and then continue to invest heavily into that community, you are it's like the flywheel is fully spinning, and you just get on and just keep pushing. I love
that. Well, that's why I love it. Influencer marketing, so hot. Everybody's talking about it. But you could have an influencer marketing strategy that parlays into, oh, this is working really well. I like this. The audience is we're building. Let's just buy that.
Yeah.
Done.
So speaking of acquisitions, right? You guys went through one this year.
We
What's
did.
that been like for you?
Um, it was a long 7-month process, believe it or not. I probably like just the day-to-day stuff of it. It does take a little bit from the business, so that was tough. I wouldn't recommend anybody just going through that process for fun,
No.
but it all worked out. We ended up with a great company, UBM, which our philosophies match, really focusing on the event as the culmination of the experience that the community has with each other. And so that's, of course, content marketing world is our thing, and everything sort of builds to that event. They saw this, they attended our event last year. We'd been talking for a while. It's something, it was always a personal goal of mine to sell it at one point.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to sell my soul. So, okay, how do you got to make sure you have the right partner that at some point, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I still believe in this. There's still a lot more work to do, but at some point, I want to make sure that this is in good hands, regardless of what I decide or my wife decides or whatever. So, it was, I don't want to go. I'm glad I don't have to go through the process again.
Yeah.
But I'm super happy that this thing is going to just continue to grow and we can still affect people's lives in a positive way.
Yeah, and it's a great example of content marketing working, right? And going to that,
Yes, it is.
The larger company coming in and taking it on and not changing everything, but understanding what the value is and what the growth looks like, and then embracing it and running.
Well,
with it.
what I like is outside of a logo here and there, you won't notice a difference here.
Yeah.
I mean, they just like, hey, just do your thing, just go and run it. It actually would be a good additional chapter for Content Inc. because I can say, look, in all these examples, and here's what happened at the end. So
exactly,
but
and then you look
it's
at
a happy ever.
Yeah,
ever
you
after.
go back to your past at Fenton. That's exactly what you guys are doing with all the smaller magazines. You're buying them in, putting them into a bigger cycle, and with an event like this, when you're in the event space, there's bigger events and there's growth patterns and there's ways to do that. That just makes sense to, after a time, to allow somebody else to start to do it, and then you get to kind of participate.
But what's interesting is it gets back to our previous conversation. So most people don't think this way, but we've been in publishing for a while, so we sort of get it. But every company is going to look exactly the same when you look at media companies and brands that sell products and services. They're all trying to build audiences. They're all trying to be the go-to resources. So you might perceive a media brand different from a product or service brand, but if you look at the business model underneath it, it's going to be the same. So what does that mean for media companies? That means media companies are going to start selling products and services because they're going to have to survive.
Yeah.
So the New York Times and Washington Post, and you're going to say, okay, well, how are they going to ultimately survive when they're competing against Microsoft and Apple? They're going to have to sell something else.
Absolutely.
Because advertising is not going to get them there. Paid subscriptions are not going to get them there. So I'm excited to see. I don't want those companies to go out of business. But I'm excited to see that transformation happen.
I mean, back in the day, you had classified ads, right? And people were using the newspapers for that, and that was a revenue source. And when that went away, they never really replaced it with something else that was like, when we sell something, how do we make a little money off of that?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved your guys' model when you talked about it of having, kind of like the Amazon marketplace for the newspapers and being able to do e-commerce too.
Yep.
And it's just a perfect transition, and they already have the audience for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they need to think of themselves as content marketing and not a newspaper.
That's exactly
and
right.
Get off the whole.
Nobody says that we have to monetize in this way. And how do we know this? Because there are 3,500 people here that are monetizing a different way. They're selling some product or service that ultimately that's how they're monetizing the audience. They're not doing it through advertising. So
yeah, and I'm with you. I don't think the micro payments on content is going to be something. It's like, if you could look at the book industry and see like Epic Content Marketing and Everybody Writes be the exact same price as somebody who, just put something out and just randomly threw a price on it. But the value of those two books is in the thousands of dollars, but I paid $15 for it, right? And if that's something that somebody's going to commit months of their life to produce, then how are we ever going to charge for something that took you a day to write, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's a fraction of a cent,
and news, there's no way that you could ever, that anybody's going to pay for news. It would have to, the content would have to be so amazing and excellent that, but here's the thing. You might say, oh, this content's going to be unbelievable. We're going to charge either full payment or micro payment for it. Well, I can guarantee you that your competitor is going to give it away for free. So when that happens, what are you going to do? Now I got to monetize it. So it's just,
it's like
a
you can't even
circle.
You can't even gate your content, and you're not getting any money. You're just getting an email address. But even that, people are turned away from. So it's a whole nother.
It's not easy. Well, that's why we're like, hey, if you're going to do it, you got to commit to it, or it's not going to work for you.
So I love the statistics you guys talked about with CCO about seeing, not looking at the numbers of people who, bought straight from the magazine, but looking at that journey that they had and seeing that it's truly impacted the company, because I think that's that differentiator, that being able to see your content marketing efforts and not measure them by the exact return on investment. Like, how much do we spend on that? And then what were we able to raise from advertisers? Right. And I'm sure you guys went through this too when you were going through the acquisition.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's why it really came up. It's funny they had to go through those numbers.
How much are you worth? Let's look at the money. And it's like, you don't get, like, there's no audience. There's no like line on that, sheet that says how much is the audience worth and how long does it take to, and it's very hard to negotiate that. And I think that's where the corporations have to get to say is, if we're going into this, we're going to pay more than they're making, and it's not going to be a 1 year or 2 year valuation of it. It's, what is this worth to us, and how can being here now versus 3 years from now, and then the Grantland
well, the whole thing with Chief Content Officer Magazine is, what is the value of a subscriber? Right. So how does a subscriber behave differently? It's actually the ultimate question that every marketer is asking. If somebody engages in my content and they subscribe to my content, what's different? What happens that's different? Do they buy more? Do they stay longer? Do they talk more favorably about our company? Whatever. So that's what we found with CCO Magazine. It was like, oh my gosh, they actually do buy more. We create, Robert Rose says this all the time, our job is to create better customers. How do we do that? We do that through engaging, consistent content delivery that's meaningful to them. So it's just, and it's not rockets. It's just, it's so, this is what's been going on for 300, 400 years. It's just that now we have the tools and technology that we can actually prove it. And that's what I love about that. Is you can say, hey, we delivered $5 million from people reading this, and they touched CCO along that buyer's journey. That's significant.
Oh yeah, and I can attest to it. I got CCO, and now every time I get it, it hits my laptop bag next to my laptop, and I find a time to read it, and then I start to come to the event, and then I start to put in for sessions, and then I'm speaking here, and it was Epic Content Marketing when I said, damn, I got to go figure out, and I grabbed the book, and then I got on the CCO subscription, and then just continually over time. It wasn't the e-newsletter. It wasn't any of that. It was the print magazine, because I didn't have any. I had, Organic Gardener, and I have golf, and I have all these stuff, but I didn't have the marketer one. And so it stood out enough to me, and the content was amazing, and it just felt like there was something bigger here. And so, you would never see that. You would never see that chain in the data. That's
awesome.
Right? But it truly does impact.
Well, that's why when you start, we talk about this in Content Inc. When you start, you really just focus on being amazing at one thing, a blog, video series, podcast, whatever. And then you're like, okay, well, what's the justification for doing more? That's what you're talking about in your journey. So we have about 13 different subscription options and things that you can get. That's why. Because you get them in the door with the one, and then how do you move them along that journey? All the podcast and the webinars and the ebooks and all that stuff. So that's why because that's the diversification stage. And then once you hit that, then you can really start to monetize. Yeah. So. And
it's always that invisible audience that they're there. You just don't necessarily have their email, but they're listening. They care about you.
They're there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today, and thanks for putting on such a great event.
Thank you for everything. I mean, we're all, as I say often, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So we want to see everybody, rising tide lifts all ships. So I truly believe that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.
You got it.
There are so many marketing tools to choose from these days. More than 3,500 the last time we checked. If you're overwhelmed and confused, you're not alone. With so many options, marketers are having a difficult time trying to select which tools will meet their team's unique needs. So why do the top content marketing teams choose DVHQ? It's because of our unique focus. Let me explain. The typical content marketing process looks something like this. You start with a defined strategy, then you ideate and brainstorm with your team. Create a plan of attack, produce the content, optimize it, then publish and promote the content, and finally, review the analytics to see how your content performed. As you may know, most marketing software tools are built to support the back half of this process. There are countless CMS platforms, email marketing tools, marketing automation systems, social publishing tools, analytics suites, etc. The list goes on and on. But here's the thing. The back half of the process is not where companies are really struggling. What marketing teams are really struggling with is the upfront part of the process, the strategy, the ideation, planning, workflow, and collaboration during the content production process. Sound familiar? If you don't get your upfront strategy and planning right, the odds of consistently publishing great content is, well, not very good. So these upfront areas are where we focus 100%. We don't want to reinvent wheels or be a jack of all trades, master of none type of content marketing solution. DVHQ is on a mission to build a content marketing platform that makes it incredibly easy for you to plan and produce high quality content more efficiently. This approach then gives you the freedom to integrate and connect DVHQ to your preferred downstream tools. So, if you're looking for help with strategy, ideation, planning, and collaboration, then we're the solution for you.